One of the great parts of a quilt show is going through the quilt and noticing how quilting techniques are developing and evolving, taking something tried and true and pushing it to the limit. Today's guest, Fiona Johnstone, did just that. Her quilt was full of 1.5 inch curves, and it just leaves you gasping. How could she possibly sew that small? And she's going to tell us all about it and how she continues to push herself. So grab your sewing and a cup of tea, and here's my interview with Fiona Johnstone. Welcome, Fiona, to the show. Whereabouts in the world are you coming to us from?
I am currently just north of Glasgow in a place called Cumbernauld in Scotland.
Are you originally from there?
I'm not. I grew up in Houston, Texas. My dad is Scottish, though. So when I came to university, I decided to come across and take the chance to study Scottish music in Scotland. And then when I got here, I realized it's much cooler than Texas. And you can see how pale I am. I don't really deal well with the heat. So that was a major draw. And then the music and the people, and I just ended up loving it here. So I never went home.
So when you say Scottish music, are we talking about the pipe bands and bagpipes, or are we talking about modern bands like Eurythmics and everything?
A bit of both, but my degree is in traditional Scottish music. So I played the fiddle. So I started when I was 5 and then played all through school. My dad plays the bagpipes. So while I was learning orchestral music, I was also learning traditional Scottish music. And then I did my degree in traditional Scottish music. So fiddle, my second instrument was bagpipes, but they're really hard and you have to actually practice them. So I don't really play them anymore. And then, people in my class played the harp, cello, and more fiddlers, bagpipes, that kind of stuff. That's what my first degree is in. And then I went on to get a master's in sound production. And that's what I do now, is more kind of the sound technical side of things.
I used to be in a pipe band. There's a lot of Scots here in Canada.
Oh, yeah. Oh, cool. Which pipe band?
I didn't play bagpipes, so I was a drummer.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So did you come from a quilty family?
Yes, I did. My mom is a sewer, so she is the reason I sew. I remember when I was 6 years old, she taught me how to use her machine, and for my 100 days of school project, I did 10 stitches of 10 different stitches. And I'd vividly remember sitting at the machine with her, working on picking different stitches and stuff. And I actually have that machine across here in Scotland with me now, and it's 30 years old, and it's quite fun to be able to use it. And then I continued on. She taught me other things. We'd have little projects. And then when I was in high school, it was more of a fiber arts that I was into. So it was more knitting and crochet. I was determined to learn all of the lace disciplines. So I learned tatting. I picked up some bobbin lace. I learned some needle lace, all the different, if I was a lace technique, I was in there on it, trying to figure it out. And then it was a few years later that I kind of got back into sewing. I did a few bags, I made a corset, and then finally kind of dove back in headfirst into quilting. And I just have absolutely loved it ever since.
When we did our textile tour last year in the Netherlands, we spent a day in Belgium and we had a lace workshop. And it was funny because we ran into a stitch and chat group. Women of all ages were making lace. And one woman spoke English and she said, the first thing you learn is you cannot make any money making lace.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a non-profit activity.
Pretty accurate. Yeah.
I just love the way that she said that's the first thing you learned.
Oh, that must have been wonderful though. That would have been so cool to see.
It was, because the lace work, I mean, there's the traditional tablecloth doily thing that you think of with lace, but there were people doing pandas. There were people, there were all these different shapes, and one person must have had about 200 bobbins going. And it was just fun to see the way that people were talking to each other. You know, this was a group activity with busy hands. So that was a lovely moment within that class.
Yeah, that's really fun. I gave up on the bobbin lace because I found it took too long to wind the bobbins. So it was a short-lived experience, but I still have the pillow. Maybe one day I'll get back to it.
So how did you find Jen Carlton Bailey?
It was during COVID, and I couldn't go to work because my husband's a paramedic. So I was kind of protecting other people from not knowing if he had COVID and stuff like that. So I had lots of time on my hands and was on Instagram quite a lot, doom scrolling like all of us were. I saw Felt Like Sweet's post about these curvelets that he made. And I was like, that looks like a really fun little project. Let me go have a look at them. So I went across to our site and ordered them, and she sent them across to Scotland, just the little 1 inch quarter circle curve templates. And I tried a few and I got completely hooked because they're really quick because they're so small. So they're really satisfying. I then just discovered that you can't do the math on how many you need for a whole quilt. But it was a really fun thing to start focusing on. And so it was because of her, it's because it felt like sweets. And then I came up with this project that kind of became a 2-year quilt project.
You said you liked it because they were small. They were just fast because they were small.
Because it takes like, I don't know, 12 stitches or something to get around that 1 inch quarter circle. So you just, once it's basted, you just zip around and then you're like, oh, this is a finished block. I mean, it's a small finished block, but it's a finished block. And then you're like, cool, okay, I'll pick up another one and I'll just, that's another finished block. So it just feels, it's like, I don't know, it's like snacks or something. It was just so quick to make a few of them. It was just really satisfying.
Were you connecting with the other people that were doing it on Instagram, or did you form an outside group?
No, not really outside, mostly Instagram, because since it was over COVID, it was quite like that kind of brought you together with more people. So there are a few people I've talked to quite a lot about curvelets over the years. A few of them have really fun ideas themselves, and I love seeing what other people do with them. Talked to Jen quite a lot about different things because she and I have quite different styles. She tends to use more solids in her projects, but then she comes up with some really fun organic shapes. And then I really like using prints and bright prints and stuff. So it's been a really fun way to connect to different people and see what they're doing and talk to them about it and stuff. So definitely Instagram, though. There's not loads of quilters here in Scotland. There are a few, but we're a bit further apart. So it's harder to kind of get together with them.
So in 2023, your quilt won People's Choice Award at QuiltCon.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
That was a lovely moment. There were so many people gathered around you and so pleased for you. It was obviously a crowd favorite. Where did the idea to come up with that quilt pattern come from?
So that came from when I started, I made a few, and that's when I realized, oh, if I want to make a quilt, I'm going to need thousands of these. And that was so overwhelming. I was like, no, I can't think about that. So instead, I set myself some rules and I decided to work on one 8-inch block at a time. So an 8-inch block was going to be made up of 4 full circles, 8 half circles, and 32 quarter circles. So I treated a quarter circle as like a unit. And so I split it up that way because it would be 8 by 8 is 64 units. And I wanted the shapes to be kind of evenly dispersed throughout the quilt. So by making sure I had a certain number in each block, I knew that across the quilt, I'd have a nice kind of spread. But then as I worked on it and I kind of made a block and then made another block, I went, I think I could do a clamshell with these little quarter circle block templates. So I figured that out and I made a clamshell block. And then, I got a few later and then I was like, I could do an orange peel with this, or I could do an apple core with this. So I started to kind of, within my 8-inch block rules, play with what shapes that I could do. And it never got overwhelming because I was only ever looking at that one block at a time. So it made what kind of, you see it now and it is very overwhelming, and I do realize that, and it's a bit chaotic because it's just colors and prints and so many fussy cuts to look at, so it is quite overwhelming now. But working a block at a time, it wasn't, because I was just doing that one little piece. So it worked out kind of really nicely. And then to win the People's Choice was it was amazing. We'd had some postal issues that year. I don't know if the Royal Mail had gotten hacked or something. So that quilt and the other quilt I had in QuiltCon didn't make it into judging because they were like a day late. So I was really frustrated. I was glad they hung up. So I was thrilled they were there, but it was pretty disappointing not to get any judges' comments on them or anything. So I was absolutely beside myself when I found out I won, because it kind of made it all worthwhile kind of thing. So it was very exciting.
It was very fun to see and be part of it. But there's smaller curves in this. I forget what you called them. Curvelitos or something?
Curvelitos, yeah. I was trying to figure out a name because I took Jen's and I was like, I could do these smaller, which is a crazy notion to begin with. But then I was trying to figure out a good diminutive thing like to add on to the end, and it's the Spanish Edo, I think, just works the best with the curvelets. So that's how they became curvelitos. So they are a 1/2 inch finished quarter circle. So that is, it shows you, that is the 1 inch quarter circle there and the 1/2 inch quarter circle in the middle. So you can kind of see the difference between them. Halfway through is when I started doing the curvelitos. And if you see my first curvelitos block, it is bad. They are not circles. They are not round. They are squashed. My half circles are not half circles. And I'm happy to point that out because like it was such a learning journey. I put the blocks in order from like when I did them. So you can see like my first blocks and you can see kind of the progression of how I got more into different shapes and how I learned how to do things slightly smoother or wanted more of a challenge. And the curvelitos, like you could see when they pop in and oh, they are not round. But as they go along, they kind of feature more and more. And by the end, like I kind of had them nailed. And so they were featured quite a lot in some of the later blocks because they were really fun to do because they're even tinier. And I love a challenge.
Well, I loved the quilt that was in the show this year, the mini. It just seemed to glow. Your colors were so beautifully chosen there. But I especially liked the name that you gave it.
Please don't ask me to say it.
Tetrachellistoma. I have no idea how to say the second part.
Burlai, I think, something like that, yeah.
But it's named after the second smallest snake.
Yeah, it is.
Leaving you some room to perfect your, I presume, your 1/4 inch.
Well, so that quilt is actually, the curvelito is the outer curve, and I don't have a name for them. Curve too smalls, I think is what I settled on, is the inner curve. So that is a 1/2 inch quarter circle on the outside of the snake and a 1/4 inch quarter circle on the inside of the snake. So that is, yeah, so that quarter circle, 1/4 inch or 1/4 inch quarter circle is there already. It's just, if I ever, get a little too bored, I might try an 1/8 inch quarter circle. But at that point, I don't know that you'd actually see the curve. So we'll see if it ever happens.
You use both machine piecing and hand piecing in these blocks. What technique do you use where?
So all of my curves are hand pieced. I know some people do the curvelets on the machine, but I have just always found it a bit too fiddly, and I got used to doing them by hand. So it's really satisfying for me to sit and do. It's very almost meditative. That is like hand sewing all the curves. I think I'd probably still be working on that first Ruby curvelets quilt if it had been, the straight lines had been hand sewn, because that is a step too far for me. So it's easier to zip through putting blocks together on the machine when they're all straight lines. But yeah, I love a hand sewn curve.
And then they're quilted on your machine.
Yes, they are also quilted on my machine, yeah. So a few of them I've just done straight line kind of matchstick quilting across. The one that was in QuiltCon this year, I followed the outside of the curve of the snakes, and it really kind of gave it dimension and popped out as well. So I think helped with the glow. It almost rippled the way the kind of quilt with the quilting came together. I had intended to do the other side of the snakes, so the snakes would pop out. But once I'd done the outside, the ripple just looked so cool, I decided to leave it. So that's how that one kind of ended up with that almost like pond drip effect.
So what did your family think of your QuiltCon win?
Oh, my mom was absolutely kind of so proud and so excited. It was really nice to be able to share that with her because she is the reason I sew. So for her to be there with me, it was pretty special. And then this year having another quilt in was really fun, and she was there with me again. So that was pretty cool. And that quilt sold, which is another kind of highlight. I think for her, it also, well, for both of us really, it kind of validated what we do, like sitting in a room sewing for kind of no reason. Occasionally people will be like, well, what are you making that for? Like, well, we're not making it for any reason. Like, why does there need to be a purpose to what we're making necessarily? For kind of to have projects that were not really for any particular reason do so well and kind of get recognition, I think was quite important for both of us as well, to kind of get that sense of validation. So yeah, everybody in my family was super proud, and I've shown the quilt off to lots of people, and it's been fun to tell them about how the newer one sold as well. So it's been very exciting.
Well, I often note that out of all the quilters in the world, 65% of them come from the US, but 65% of that are from Texas.
Oh,
Quilting is so big in Texas. So
I didn't realize there were like that's No, she's even more insular than me. I keep trying to get her to join the Houston Modern Quilt Guild, but I'm still working on it. I'm going to drag her to a meeting sometime when I go visit, I think, because I think she'd really enjoy getting a bit more peopling. She does belong to, she has a little sewing group she goes to every week, and they sew for charity. So I went along to that when I was home after QuiltCon, and that was a lot of fun. There's a bunch of kind of lovely little ladies who sit and they sew like heart pillows for hugging after heart surgeries. There's a table of stuffers, and they seem to have a great time. They just stuff all the shapes, and then my mom's part of the finishing team, and they just sew up seams. And there's another team that like knits blankets. So they kind of, it's just a nice get together for a bunch of ladies to come and have a bit of a get out of the house and have a chat. So she really enjoys that. So I'm hopefully gonna sneak her into the other modern quilt guild sometime too.
Have you ever been to the International Quilt Show in Houston?
Yes, I used to go with my mom all the time. I haven't been back since I came across to Scotland though, because it's such an awkward time for me. We didn't get Thanksgiving off, so I couldn't go home for Thanksgiving. And even then, like being home at kind of in the end of October and then being home in November for Thanksgiving or December for Christmas, just the timing never worked out. So I'm hoping to get back at some point, but I might be a few years before I figure out the timing just right. But it was a great show. I loved it because there were so many things, as well as the giant quilts and the really fancy quilted quilts. And I love the dolls. And we used to laugh at all the quilts that were made with like 1 inch pieces. And then I became one of those people.
Well, sewing small is a whole different skill set than sewing big.
You have to be more accurate. But saying that, like, I don't know that I'm necessarily all that accurate. I think, but you do have to realize that when you go smaller, there's less room for error. So if you are a bit off, then everything will be a bit off and it just kind of all goes. But if you're doing improv or something like that, then that works fine. But if you're trying, like my little quilt that I had in QuiltCon this year, it was a bit intense to try to make sure everything lined up and everything was precise. And I got all the pieces for that laser cut because of the precision, and it meant that I didn't have to worry about cutting them out myself by hand because that would have taken forever. And it also meant that they were all exactly the right size that I needed them to be. A different skill set, but still fun.
Yeah. So spun straw is an interesting name. Where did that come from?
I got a spinning wheel, and I was trying to come up with like a blog or something to kind of follow my journey of learning how to spin on a spinning wheel. And I've always quite liked the Rumpelstiltskin story because my hair's like bleach blonde now, but it was a very kind of straw blonde before. So like I've always had really light hair, and the idea of spinning hair into gold, or straw into gold, kind of, yeah, I always kind of related to it. I think I kind of came up with that spun straw thing for the spinning wheel, and then never really did anything with the spinning wheel and ended up selling it, and then really liked the name, so I kept it for quilting stuff, and it just kind of continued on. And now I'm quite glad because it's a nice draw, kind of a thing to like a brand kind of thing to follow.
And you could probably do a couple of little curvelets in it too if you ever did your logo.
Yeah, no, I've got a banner up across behind my computer, which I'm looking at, but yeah, I'll have to try to do my letters and curvlitos and curvelets sometime.
Are there a lot of spinners in Scotland?
I think so. Yeah, we do have a really long history of spinning and weaving. We've got the Harris tweed that gets made out in the Hebrides. So that is all done on mechanical looms, but like hand run, foot run mechanical looms. They don't tend to spin their own wool, but there'll be spinning mills and stuff like that that will spin. And we have so many sheep that you got to do something with all of the wool. So there's quite a bit of spinning and weaving and stuff in the area, and it's one of the things that, like, because I always liked like knitting and crocheting, I've always been interested in fibers and how they work together and play together. And so that was a fun thing to try, but it didn't last all that long. But I'm glad I got a wheel for a bit and had to go.
Well, I think in a lot of women's minds because of the story of Cinderella and pricking your finger on the spinning wheel and everything. But I've just been reading a book on women's work. It's actually an old book, but I've never gotten around to reading it, but talking about how much spinning, how much of it would show on your hands. because you'd build up these calluses, and in a time gone by, a woman's hands were, you could tell the class of person she was just by whether she spun or not.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and then you'd probably get the linen stuff because they in days gone by they wouldn't really be spinning with clean wool either. So like the wool would be quite mucky as you're spinning with it too. So I'm sure your hands would be pretty disgusting. They feel lovely, but they probably look pretty disgusting.
So tell me about labels. Do you put one on your quilt?
I try to, yes. The ones that go into competitions kind of tend to get like a competition label. I make a lot of baby quilts for friends and coworkers and stuff, and I do quite like making sure they get a little label with like the baby's name and made by me and stuff. But I probably could be better with putting the date the things were made. That yeah, I could be better about labeling things, but I kind of tend to forget once it's done. You're like, oh, it's done. This is great, and then you forget that. Oh, I should probably actually get a little bit of like the date and who made it and that kind of thing in it and the name of the quilt and that stuff. But I'm too excited about having finished it and getting it off to whoever it needs to be, whether it's a quilt competition or, a new baby.
I'm that way. I have to make my label early in the process. Otherwise, I'm like, I'm done.
That's a great idea. That's what I try to do with binding. I like getting it done when I'm cutting stuff for the quilt because then it's just done by the time you're ready to bind. Otherwise, you're like, oh, it's one more step.
So other than to QuiltCon, have you done much traveling now for quilting?
No, well, my friend Laura and I go down to Festival of Quilts. Well, we have the past couple years. I'm not sure I'll make it this year because of sound work commitments. But that's been a lot of fun. But it's more of a joyride, really. I haven't gone down to teach or anything. Teaching at QuiltCon in Phoenix was my first time traveling for teaching. That was very exciting. So I'm kind of hoping that will be something that happens over the next few years. I've been contacted by a couple guilds around the country. So I'll start traveling about for some guild work as well, which is really fun. It'll be great to chat quilting with more people. That's the best part of all of this is just getting to talk more about tiny curves and different circles and different shapes and just sewing. It's just nice to share a hobby with people and talk about like the hobby that we all share. And because otherwise, I talk to people at work and I'm like, yeah, I sewed this thing. And they're like, cool, go plug in that microphone.
Well, I have a friend who is a super fan of the rock group Cheap Trick, and she has made a quilt for them every year. And
wow.
they actually have featured her quilts in an article when they're talking about all the things that you've received. What are your favorite things? And they'll say, well, this quilt. But she makes one every year
That's
for
so
them.
cool.
And I'm going, boy, that's a devoted fan.
Yeah, that's very devoted. And it's nice that they're like thrilled by it too. That's really cool.
So when did you start lecturing?
QuiltCon was my first lecture. So I had an idea and I really wanted to be able to go and talk about this idea because I hadn't really seen many people do it. I wanted people to be more interested in how to use a quarter circle. It came about from doing my Ruby Curvelets project. And I was like, I've got this one template and I just found out like how much I could do with it. So I wanted to inspire other people to think, oh, well, I've got this one template or I've got this shape and how can I use it? How can I combine more shapes to use fewer seams and get bigger bits of fabric and maybe try some Y seams or just try some more challenging things. I'm really big. I said earlier about how I'm happy to point out mistakes in my quilt because you learn from mistakes. And I really want people to go and try things and they might not work out. They might work out first time. They might not, but you won't know and you won't learn from it unless you actually try it. So I'm very much a Miss Frizzle, go get messy, make mistakes kind of person. And I want people to kind of take that on because as adults, I think we're really scared of trying a new thing and not being good at it, especially in quilting. All you're going to waste is a little bit of fabric. And if you're working small or if you try it out small before you go big, you're not even wasting that much fabric. So just do it and, just try the thing. And so I was thrilled the Modern Quilt Guild gave me the chance to give my lecture and try to inspire more people to try some new shapes, try some new piecing techniques, just do something a bit different and not be scared of it.
So have you expanded that into a workshop as well?
Not yet. My teaching has been the curvelitos, and then the lecture is the quarter circle kind of idea thing. But I haven't expanded the quarter circle project, like what you can do with them, into a workshop. I think that would take a bit of planning to figure out how to fill a bunch of time with like what to do. But yeah, it's a fun idea.
On your Etsy shop, you have all sorts of paper piecing, some beautiful, cute things. Was that before the curvelets came into your life, or is that concurrent?
I think it was concurrent. I love a bit of foundation paper piecing because you can do some really fun designs and you can get really precise with lines that you wouldn't be able to do with traditional piecing. So I got into it, and then I discovered that making the patterns was like a puzzle within a puzzle, and I loved that challenge as well. So that's how I kind of came about with the patterns that I've got up on my Etsy, because you have to puzzle out how to make the shape, and then you have to puzzle out how to make it work together with how you kind of do which piece you do first and which piece you sew second, and then it's another puzzle in actually putting the sections together. So it was a great kind of thing for my brain to actually go puzzle. So I really enjoy the foundation paper piecing, like especially the pattern designing is really good fun. I haven't done any in a while because I've been focused on the like curvelets a bit more, but it's a good break from one to the other because it's very different. You've got the hand piecing with the curvelets, and then some very precise like paper piecing with the foundation paper piecing. So it's nice to get a break from one and do another thing. And I like to mix up projects. I do big quilts too, maybe not as often, but working tiny things take a little bit longer, so you can do kind of a longer project. But yeah, it's nice to break things up.
You talk about puzzles a lot. Are there many puzzles in your day job that you need to solve?
Oh yes, my day job is all puzzles. Yeah, I think just the way my brain works, I like problem solving, and that's how I ended up as a live sound engineer. Because if you set up a whole system, so let's say like I set up a mixing desk and I set up a microphone on a stage, and it might all work just fine, but then you might plug in the microphone and nobody can hear it. So then you have to think, right, okay, where's the problem in the chain? How do we figure this out? Most of my day job is figuring out puzzles. So it's kind of, I guess it's a bit weird that my hobby is also figuring out puzzles, but I think it's just makes my brain happy.
I had a guest on, his name was Brandon Huff, and he says he loves things that tickle his brain. And I love that analogy.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, his work is amazing. I love watching him come up with all his new pieces and stuff. So he and I probably have similar brains.
So if people want to get a hold of you, want to see some of your work and all the wonderful things that you do with curves, where's the best place to find you?
The best place is probably Instagram. I'm quite active. I haven't posted much recently, but I'm there behind the scenes. If you have any questions, you can send me a message. I'm Spun Straw on Instagram. I also am Spun Straw on Pinterest and Etsy and Facebook and everywhere really. So I've managed to keep the same handle everywhere. But yeah, come check me out on Instagram. I've got a lot of the work that I do, I put up there.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show today and
Oh
sharing
no,
your
thank
love
you
of
so much for
curves.
having me on. It's been a lot of fun. I love talking about tiny curves and sewing. It's great.
Well, thank you. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Fiona Johnstone. Has she inspired you to give these tiny curves a try? Let me know down in the notes. I will also put all of Fiona's contact info and social media links in the video notes below. Next time you're in your sewing room, have Karen's Quilt Circle playing in the background. I have interviewed so many inspiring, amazing people on this show. Let one inspire you. Take care, and I'll see you next time.